this is going to be a pseudo wrap up to my Those Who Hate Ron Paul series. Obviously, there are other groups that don't like him, and I thought about making videos about people who do like him. And Kaidioteca, one of my best subscribers, came on and said, "Why don't I do a video on people like Stefan Molyneux, the anarcho-capitalists or the radical libertarians?" And I actually thought about doing that, and I'm not going to make this explicitly about that. I'm going to kind of combine it with that and have it be about how we should engage in politics generally. And I don't want to say this is normative, but of course the argument goes, among radical libertarians that the government is evil, and so taxation is theft and all that, and so because of this, um, levels of association with the government are not acceptable to some people, and it depends who you're talking to, how much. There's a debate between Gary North and Walter Block about becoming a professor, and one of Gary North's, and they're both anarcho-capitalists, and one of Gary North's main points was, well, you're working for the government probably, and that's evil. Interestingly enough, though, Block countered, well, you drive on the roads, and of course Gary North does, and of course Gary North is a big Ron Paul supporter. He's written quite a bit about his campaigning and all that. He even worked for him once. So although there are great moral arguments against the state, I don't think the moral arguments against any level of participation are as strong. However, I will say that practically speaking, you don't get very good returns on investment when you try and do things in politics. Um, you can spend an enormous amount of your time and energy campaigning for a cause and achieve literally nothing or even less than nothing or very, very, very little. Where if you would put that same amount of time and effort into, say, uh, improving your own position or convincing others or just spreading the message, you would have experienced much, much better return on investment. And so my philosophy is that I'm not going to get wrapped up to the point where I think Ron Paul is our last hope. I think that's dangerous to think like that. I'm not going to say that I'm going to work for him all the time. I've given him some money. I may give him some more. I may vote in the primary in my state. I doubt very, very much that I'd ever vote in the election. If he was actually the candidate, I probably would. Um, but then I doubt that he'll actually be the candidate. And I might go to rallies, 'cause sometimes that's fun to just go and hang out with people. But I kind of look at it as like my contribution is a hobby contribution. I'm not going to become a serious campaigner. And I'll look at it this way. I mean, because people say, no, it's not good enough. Well, if enough people actually do just put in a little of that extracurricular effort, it actually ends up being enough. In the meantime, I have to work on protecting myself, buying gold, buying guns, buying food, reading, becoming smarter myself, and then evangelizing and convincing other people, which I do. This is part of the reason I have this channel, but I do it in my personal life too. And I've influenced quite a number of people, to not all the same degree, obviously, but a few. And I feel like I get way better returns in that way than I ever will with the money I give to the Paul campaign. Although he does seem to use it to that effect. So I think we're, as being anti-government people, we're being confronted with the very, very likely, very real possibility that the greatest proponent of liberty approaching ever, it's still debatable, it's up in the air, is going to probably end up being Ron Paul. Brian Doherty wrote a book, I think it was called what was it called? Radicals for Capitalism. It was about the 5 most important libertarians, and it was Ayn Rand, Milton Friedman, F.A. Hayek, Mises, and Rothbard. And I thought that was a pretty good list. but I think that they've probably at this point all been eclipsed by Ron Paul, uh, and that's just the fact. That's just the way it is. I mean, I heard Block pointed this out to Molyneux. Like the chances are that the numbers of people Molyneux has changed are absolutely minuscule in comparison to those Ron Paul has. Uh, but it's true also. I mean, Paul says this himself. He's just uh, advocating for ideas, specifically the ideas of Rothbard and Mises, and maybe to a lesser extent Hayek from that list. He's very good if all his books have suggested reading lists, and they're basically, I mean, they're as hardcore as it gets, and they're very good reading lists. And people who read his books often end up reading those books as well. You know, you've got The Democracy, The God That Fails, Human Action, Man, Economy, and State, No Treason, The Myth of Rational Defense. He doesn't water it down any, and so uh, I'm not against people like Molyneux criticizing him. I think it's good to have legitimate intellectual criticism, which is something that is not to be found from the liberals or the conservatives, who are likely just going to not get above name calling. You know, he's crazy. He hates the poor. He wants us all to die. He's for the terrorists. Come on, that stuff is stupid. Uh, the only ones who are offering anything would be the hardcore libertarians, and I think it's good somebody's doing it, and I kind of partially agree. Like, you should never put your hopes in Ron Paul. You can watch and think it's cool and root for him and help him along, but at the end of the day, um, it's actually his messages. You're going to have to stand on your own 2 feet anyway, even if he wins. That's the whole point, right? So you should be putting most of your effort into that. And then if you have extra, if you want to, go right ahead and have a good time, because it's fun. I'll admit, it's nice going to rallies and getting in arguments and uh, watching them in the debates and watching them win polls and watching the politicos, you know, dance around the fact that he obviously has a constituency and popularity and influence. You can debate how much, but they would just assume he had none. I mean, he had. Yeah, I should have put this in the other one. You know, the politicos are like a whole bunch of pigs eating out of a trough, and the various presidential candidates are like the farmer who comes and says, "Well, if I'm elected farmer, I'm going to put corn in the slop," and another one will say, "Well, I'm going to put more uh, pumpkins in the slop," and another one will say, "Well, I'm going to fill the trough 3 times a day." And then Ron Paul comes and says, "Well, I'm going to knock over the trough and kick it over, make sure there's never a trough ever again." Okay, the pigs are all going to look at each other, and they're all going to know immediately that the one candidate who doesn't belong, who is completely different from the other ones, is him, and that's what he's doing. And so that's a big part of the reaction against him. And I actually like that because those pigs eating off the trough, that's skin off of my back and everybody else's. I'm definitely not getting what I'm paying in. So that's skin off my back, and they can go and find their own food for all I care. And if Ron Paul can help make that happen, that's awesome. But at the end of the day, it's more of a hobby, less of a cause, I guess. Even though, I mean, I look them up online every day. I read most of the articles that come up about them, and that's basically the level that I follow politics, which is probably skewing my view quite a bit. You know, if anything, it's going to make me think he's more popular than he is, which I try and account for. Which is why also I've said a couple times, I do think it's a long shot, but I don't think it's impossible. And since it's such a big field, it's definitely not impossible. So anyway, that's it.